So excited this morning to get to share the word with you. And if we haven't had the chance to meet, my name is Rye. I'm the student pastor here at the Bridge, and I get to pastor an incredible group of students. We call ourselves the Movement, and it's so much fun to get to be a part of the Bridge here. And man, it's been so exciting the last couple weeks to hear Pastor Mark and Pastor Luke. Have you enjoyed this series so far? Man, they've just set up this incredible framework. And so this morning, I just want to kind of tag in and preach a message to you that I'm calling Created to Move. And if you're in here this morning, I want a show of hands. If you would say that you've been surprised by something, I want you to raise your hand. Raise your hand if you've ever been surprised. Maybe you were driving down the road and your car randomly ran out of gas and it surprised you. You ever had that? Man, that's terrible. Maybe you saw a food and it didn't look that great, but then you tried it and it was better than it looked. Come on, somebody. That's, if it looks bad, I probably won't eat it. I'm just gonna be honest. But for me, one of the biggest surprises I've ever had was when I was 14, my parents and some of my friends had decided they were gonna throw me a surprise party. And so my friend came and picked me up that morning, and we drove around for like 6 hours, and we kept getting lost, and I couldn't figure out why, because we were in the same city we grew up in. So we just kept getting lost and kept going all over the place, and then finally we get to my house, and because I had no clue that there was a surprise party happening, I kept my normal 14-year-old routine, which is you avoid your parents. And so I walked in the door, and there's a huge staircase, and I walked straight upstairs to my room, not knowing that there was about 50 people hiding in the living room as I just bypassed everybody. And I went straight upstairs, went to my room, started playing video games like usual, and all of a sudden my parents go, "Ryan, we need you to come downstairs." And I was 14, and so what do you do when your mom yells at you? "Mom, what do you want?" "Oh my gosh." And so I start having that moment as I'm coming down the stairs, I'm fussing at my parents and I'm walking down and I turn the corner and everybody jumps out. It's like, surprise, as I'm sitting yelling at my parents in front of everybody. You see, it's funny, but what's so interesting about that story is I just kept my normal routine and I went to my room, but I didn't know what was in the house waiting for me. And I think it works the same way with church. You see, I was surprised because I wasn't looking for it. But church is something that will surprise you too. So maybe you're in the room this morning and church is just a room full of people for you. Maybe you're in the room and church is just a room. Or maybe it's just a gathering, or maybe it's just a part of your routine like we talked about last week, where you come and you check the box before Cracker Barrel and you kind of like do that before you move on. Or maybe it's a negative thing. Maybe church is something that you were forced to do, not something that you chose. Maybe church is something that you see as a place full of hypocrites. But this morning, what if it's more? I want us to talk about this, because what if we're missing what the church really is because we're simply walking right past it instead of stopping to experience the beautiful surprise that it is? Because here's what we've been learning the last couple weeks is we've been learning that the church isn't a place, it's a people. So it's not where you go, it's who you are. And my favorite line of the entire series so far is that it's a victorious movement. It's a victorious movement. You see, the Big C church, not just the Bridge, but the Big C church is this anomaly where all kinds of different people from all different kinds of backgrounds and all different circumstances and stories can come together under one banner, and it's a name, and his name is Jesus, and we can say, I'm gonna lay aside my preferences and I'm gonna step into this beautiful thing that God has called me to. But if you're like me and you grew up in a church where church was just something you did, you might miss out on the beautiful thing that the church really is. You see, we don't see the potential that the church really has. So growing up, I grew up I'm the son of a pastor's kid. So my mom is a pastor's kid, and my grandfather was a pastor, and so church was not optional for me. So I grew up going to church no matter what. It was really, really traditional. It was like an open bag of chips. It was really stale. And it was super boring. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, we would come and we would sit in the pews, which is also known as literally the most uncomfortable chair ever invented. And then we would grab our hymn books. Anybody hymns? So we would grab our hymn books and they would yell out a number and you would turn to the page and, right? And it was stale. And it was something that people came to, but I never understood what it was like to have a church that moved. So I grew up just thinking that the church is just a room full of people, and I missed out on the fact that when the church begins to move, things can happen, and they'll surprise you. And so that's what I want to dive into this morning, is what happens when the church moves. I love our story in the Bible this morning because if you've ever heard me preach, you know I usually preach a story where Jesus shows up and shows out. So I love the stories where Jesus is listening to the disciples complain, and then he's like, all right, hold on real quick, let me blow your mind. And so this story this morning, in Mark chapter 6, we see the story begin with this group of apostles. They're coming back from being on tour. And if you don't know what the apostles are, it's literally just a group of misfits that Jesus sent out. And he said, you can teach and you can heal and you can do all of these incredible things. And so they come back and they're all amped up and they're all real excited because all these crazy things happened. And all these people start noticing that the apostles are here and that Jesus is here. And so what do? They start flocking to them like usual. And so the disciples, like they usually do, they panic and they have this moment where they say, Jesus, this place is a little too remote for us. Another translation says that this place is a little too desolate, which means it's dead. This place is a little too dead for us. Can we move on? And this is where we pick up in the story. Mark chapter 6, verse 35. It says, late in the afternoon, his disciples came to him and said, this is a remote place and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the nearby farms and villages and buy something to eat. But Jesus said, you feed them. So Jesus is saying, we're not going to send them away. You feed them. With what? They asked. We'd have to work for months to earn enough money to buy food for all these people. How much bread do you have? He asked. Go and find out. They came back and reported, we have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Then Jesus told the disciples to have the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of 50 or 100. And Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, looked up toward heaven and blessed them. Then breaking the loaves into pieces, he kept giving the bread to the disciples so they could distribute it to the people. He also divided the fish for everyone to share. They all ate as much as they wanted. That's very important. A total of 5,000 men and their families were fed from those loaves. This story is funny to me because the disciples quickly say, we need to move away from this dead situation. But Jesus, what does he do? He immediately says, no, I'm about to teach you a lesson. We're not moving away, we're moving into this situation. You see, this is what's so cool about this story is Jesus is literally about to show us what happens when his people move and fully rely on him. And I don't necessarily blame the disciples because we do this a lot of times where we say, I don't know, let's move into another section, but Jesus challenges them because he knows something to be true. The first thing is this: when the church moves, God provides. When the church moves, God provides. They didn't see, the disciples, they didn't see that they had everything the people needed sitting in the crowd. They had no clue that Jesus was going to feed everyone. You notice this because Jesus says, you feed them, and what do? They immediately start talking about the quantity of what they do have, and they start saying that it's not enough. So Jesus says, you feed them, and they say, well, it would take 200 days' wage for us to feed all these people. We don't have enough, and we do this in church as well. We look at situations in our city, and we say, there's no way I can do that. I can never solve that problem. There's no way I could ever step into that. That's too big of a task for me. There's no way I could ever step into that situation because I'm too small, I'm too unqualified. And I love what Pastor Luke said last week, because you're completely right. You're completely right, but here's the thing, is all Jesus wanted them to do was bring what they had to the table, and then he would do what only he can do. See, this is what happens. Jesus just wants the church to bring what they have to the table, and then he'll take care of the rest. You see, so many times we think we have to be everything for everybody, but we were never called to do that. You see, we're sharing something that can be that for everybody. I don't know if you know this, but our city is hungry. They're hungry. Man, they want something to fill them up. They want something to give them a moment where they say, man, I finally found it. I finally found that thing that will help. I finally found that thing that will fill me up for good. And what's so amazing about what we have as the church is we don't just have something to fill their stomach. We have something that's going to fill their soul. You see, we have something that when they come to the table, man, they're going to get more than just a momentary filling. They're going to get something that's eternal. You see, and this is what he did with the disciples. He made them count what they had, and then he somehow made it enough. He took what they had, even though it was small, and he somehow made it enough. You see, something I love about our church is that we create a table every single Sunday. We do. And it's amazing that we create tables here for people to come and experience and to get filled up and to come into a church experience and to experience something better than life. And I love that, but I don't want you to miss the fact that God is also calling you to create a table where you are every single day. He's also calling you to create a table in your workplace. He's also calling you to create a table in your family. He's also calling you to create a table in your school. He's also calling you to create a table wherever you walk. All he wants is your yes on the table, and he'll do the rest. I need you to know that, if you ever have a situation where you think God won't provide, I promise he'll blow your mind. If there's ever a moment where you begin to doubt, I promise he will show out. If there's ever a moment where you say, I don't know if what I have in the basket is enough, God will literally take that and do more with it than you ever could have. And this is what happens when the church moves, because we're just ordinary people. You see, this is what an inactive church is, a room full of people. You want to know what else is a room full of people? A mall. You want to know what else is a room full of people? A school, an auditorium, a football field, an arena. What makes us different? What makes us different is the fact that we have power. We have power that when we get together and when the church shows up and says, every single one of us, our yes is on the table, then miracles can happen. See, this is what happens in our city is we just put our table out and then we wait on God to produce the miracle. We just wait on God to produce what we can't. The second thing is this, is when the church moves, community is created. You see, we see in this story, it's really funny. Did you notice that the way Jesus had them sit right before he produced a miracle? So read this in verse 39. It says, then Jesus told the disciples to have the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So he grouped them together. So they sat down in groups of 50 or 100, and then it says he started passing out the miracle. Because this is how God works. God works in community. So when the church is unified, miracles can happen. So when the church is together, anything is possible. Matthew 16:8 that we read in the first message says that the gates of hell will not prevail against us, but that's only true if we're together. That's only true if we're locking arms and we're saying, hey, this is what we're doing, and we're doing this together. Jesus always will bring people together before he'll produce a miracle. So this week, love happens. We had an opportunity. And yes, it's just 1 week, but we had an opportunity for people to come together as small groups. Did you notice the way we did that? As small groups, and then to go and serve, and then to go and love. Because when community is created, miracles can happen. When community is created, we can see God do incredible things. I've always said this to any team that I've been on. The best way to unify a church is to create opportunities for miracles to happen. And that's what we did this week. We just said, hey, we have opportunities. Let's get together. Let's go see what love can do. Let's go see what happens when love shows up in our community. And I was talking to one lady, and she was so sweet, and she said this. She said, my favorite part of Love Happens was seeing people that didn't know each other before serve and love together like we've known each other forever. Like we've known each other forever. Because this is what happens when people lay aside their differences. This is what's beautiful about the church, is it doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter what your background is. If we can lay all of our preferences aside and just say, all we want, Jesus, is you, man, community and the beautiful picture of the church, the way God intended it, man, miracles will happen in our city. And I just want you to know today, and I know it's cheesy, but community really can't happen without you. You have to be a part. You have a role. There's a relationship for you. There's people that want to come around you and help you fulfill that God-given purpose that was planted in you in the beginning. You see, this is what we want to see happen as a church, is we want to see people loved right where they are, but then led into a growing relationship with Christ. And a part of growing in your relationship with Christ is getting people around you that will help you fulfill that thing that God has called you to. You see, when the church moves, community is created. And the third thing is this: when the church moves, circumstances change. Circumstances change. Did you notice that in the beginning of the story, they were saying, how are we ever going to do this? And then by the end of the story, we're saying we're overflowing with more than enough. How many times have we done that in our lives? Jesus, I don't know how we're ever going to accomplish this. And then God gets involved and community happens, and then all of a sudden we see things change and we go, man, God did more than we ever thought he could. You see, the disciples may have started with disbelief, but when they simply started moving, things started changing because of who was in the midst. Because of who was in the midst. I don't know if we really understand the power we have at our disposal. I don't know if we really understand the fact that we have the same power that rose Christ from the dead inside of us. I don't know if we really understand the fact that when we come together and when we let the Spirit lead and when we together say, and we're going to lay aside all of our preferences and all the things that we prefer and all the things that we want and all of those things, and we just say, we know what people need and we know what we need, and we're going to take it to them. And we're going to move. What you begin to see is you'll see circumstances just begin to change. But I don't want to move past this, because as a pastor, I hear a lot of people say, Pastor, we need to serve more. We need to love more. We need to share the gospel. You know, they get that roll in their throat when they say gospel just because it sounds more spiritual. Share the gospel more. And it's real awesome, like, and I love it. It's like my favorite thing. And I agree 100%. We need to love more. We need to serve more. We need to step out more. We need to do more. But what we often miss is that we have an opportunity and we have a microphone that's louder than the one I'm currently yelling into. And it's called your life. It's your life. It's your everyday life. It's louder than the microphone I'm talking into because you have a sphere of influence that I don't have. And I have a sphere of influence that you don't have. So what if we all came together under the banner of Jesus and said, wherever I go, I'm taking him with me. And wherever you go, you take him with you. And no matter what happens, we're together. And we're going to see circumstances change because we're believing in something bigger than ourselves. Man, I just want us to begin to see the way Jesus talks about his church. He calls us the hope of the world. He calls us people called out of darkness into his marvelous light. And then it literally says, so that you will proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out. Which means that if you're a recipient of the goodness of God, it is now your job to share the goodness of God. And it doesn't take a mic. And it doesn't take a production. And it doesn't take a building because we know that's not what the church is. The church is a victorious movement. It's a group of people that are saying, we can't do this by ourselves. We need Jesus to step in. We are plan A. We're not plan B. We are his people. We're his bride. We are the people that he called out so that we can make some changes. I don't know if you know this, but right here in Bradenton, homelessness can change if the church moves. It can change if the church moves. Marriages can change if the church moves. Family histories can change if the church moves. Teenagers can change if the church moves. Kids' futures can change if the church will move. See, this is the incredible opportunity we have, but you have to understand that an inactive church is just a room full of people enjoying a church experience, but not fully experiencing the church the way God intended it. And I need you to understand that when Pastor Mark laid out this incredible thing for us, week 1, where he said it's a victorious movement, notice he didn't say it's a victorious moment, because it's more. So it's not just coming in and singing songs. It's a movement. It's not just coming in and having a hoorah moment and us singing Kumbaya and then everybody moving on. No, it's so much more. See, I don't want to have my best moments here. I don't want to have miracles just here. I want to have miracles in schools. And I want to have miracles in workplaces. And I want to have miracles wherever I go. And I know that it's possible because God will provide. You see, when God provides, everything can change. But what we have to do together is we have to say, we're going to move. We're going to step out of comfort. We're not going to be like the disciples in this moment where they say, man, this is a desolate place. This is a dead place. This is too much. It's too late. It's too dark. I want to go away. No, we're going to say, okay, there's a dark place. How is the light going to fill it? Hey, there's a dark place. Okay, how can we help? See, I'm only 25, but I've been blessed to just see churches that move. I've been blessed to be a part of movements where people actually impacted communities. So one, for example, is I got the opportunity to go to South Dakota to Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And I got to go, even though it was like 20 hours away from where I lived. We took a huge group of people and we went up there because we heard just one fact, that the suicide rate is in the 70% between 15 and 18-year-olds. So we said, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna just send them money? Are we gonna just send them a letter? Are we just gonna say, hey, good luck, praying for you? No, we decided that we were going to take a group of people and we were gonna go step in and see the circumstance change. And so at the beginning of the trip, we went from driving down the road, checking trees, to seeing people change their life. At the beginning of the week, we saw ropes hanging from trees. We saw people that already had suicide notes written, handing them over to the leaders. Because this is what happens when the church moves. When the church doesn't say, well, that's impossible for us, but the church says anything is possible with God. When you step in, things can change. So I've had the opportunity to preach in prisons, to preach in jails, to go cell block after cell block and to preach live in a jail cell. And I can tell you, it seems terrifying, but I've seen people that once said they were hopeless, and once said, I'm unusable, and once said, I'm unredeemable, and once said, there's no way I can get out, proclaim over their life again, I am a child of God. I am redeemable. Jesus does love me right where I am. Jesus has forgiven what I've done. You have to understand, when the church steps in, things can change. Even in this community, I had the opportunity a couple weeks ago to get in the car with an amazing couple, the Harrises, that lead Bring On the Ministry. I got the opportunity to just drive around Bradenton and just see them do something that's not mind-blowing. It's literally just loving people right where they are, and just loving the homeless in our community right where they are. And I saw them just light up dark places, because this is what the church does. Like, if we're not going to bring light, what are we doing? If we're not gonna help, why are we even in the conversation? See, here's what's so amazing about the church right now in 2019, is we are making our way into places that people once thought would be impossible. So we're making our way into culture. We're making our way into music. We're making our way into fashion. We're making our way into leadership. We're making our way into politics. We're making our way into these things. Why? Because we had a promise a long time ago that if we would move, the gates of hell would not prevail. If we would step in, if we would just step, if we would just say, you know what? It's not about my preference anymore. It's not about me anymore. It's not about waiting. It's not about saying that's not possible. It's about saying, I'm gonna put my yes on the table and I'm gonna go. And circumstances can change, and God has a special role for you in it. And your role is not gonna look like mine, and mine's not gonna look like yours, but that's what's beautiful, is that we all have a part to play, and it's gonna make a beautiful picture in the end. See, the church is a big, crazy, beautiful mess, and I love it because Jesus is faithful in it. See, he's faithful in it. When the church is created to move, what are you called to move into? See, then this morning, I just don't want to move past this, and because maybe you're in the room and you're saying, well, Pastor Rye, I understand that the church is capable of all these things and that there's freedom for the people in the community, but what about me? I understand that God provides, but I haven't seen him do that for me yet. I understand that God loves the church, but does he really love me? And I'm here to tell you this morning, you have a God that is obsessed with you. You have a God that is so obsessed with you that he left his throne to come and meet with you, to come and be a part of your life, to come to know you, not the person next to you, you, to know your name, to give you a purpose, to give you a new life, to give you something that you once didn't know was available for yourself. You see, all morning we've been talking about what happens when the church moves, but let me tell you what happens when God moves. When God moves, he'll provide every need. He'll create community around you that you never thought was possible, and your circumstances this morning will begin to change. Now, you praying a prayer this morning is not gonna immediately make everything happen. But I promise what you're gonna see this morning, if you make a decision to say, I'm gonna step fully into a relationship with Jesus, what you'll begin to see is you'll see God the way he's always intended for you to see him. And he's stronger than death. He's better than life. And there's nothing else that I need. If you're in the room this morning, I just want to ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes. And this is a moment for you to just get real with God and just to say, hey, Pastor Ryan, I need to make that decision. I need to make that first time step. I need to recommit my life. See, everything can change from this moment forward. Right where you're sitting, you can just pray a prayer that's like this. You say, God, I need you. Come into my life. I give you my past. I give you my present. I give you my future. God, have your way.
Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us today. And if our ministry has been a source of encouragement for you, let me encourage you to do two things. Number one, share it with a friend who needs hope. That would make a big difference in their life. Secondly, share it with us. We would love to hear your story. You can send us an email at amen@bridgechurchfl.com. And finally, if you'd like to partner with us financially as we bring hope both locally and around the world, you can do that directly through our website, bridgechurchfl.com/give. And thank you for letting us be a part of your spiritual journey.